loving being Matthew 25. So just a few more words about that. Again, we come here as representatives from the Presbyterian Mission Agency. And this Matthew 25 vision, just number one, a point of clarity. When I joined the mission agency, Matthew 25 was being identified as an initiative. And most of us understand initiative as the initiative that Tony and I work with means work. There's something to do, right? And Matthew 25 is not a thing to do per se. It's the thing to be. It's the vision of the church. We're Presbyterians, so we kind of get this opportunity to discern our identity. And it's an identity. And Diane, as brilliant and amazing as she is, she didn't come up with that. First of all, it came out of an overture from the 222nd General Assembly, but not even that great group of people was smart enough to come up with Matthew 25. There's this other dude, that book.
That ancient book?
Bible.
Yeah, that one.
Jesus. Yeah. I'm sorry, sometimes it slips. But came up with that. And often I joke that it's difficult, for whatever ways we do identify ourselves, if we're following Jesus indeed, to not be Matthew 25, right? So it's not necessarily about following the vision of the Presbyterian Church or following the leadership of Diane Moffat. It's more about following the request of Jesus. And so this bold vision and invitation of Matthew 25, specifically verses 31 through 46, is to be the hands and feet of Jesus, serving people who are hungry, oppressed, imprisoned, or poor, and awakening compassionate faith to new possibilities in the life of the PCUSA. This vision has three foci. Actually, at this point, there are six. We call these the primary foci and the other three intersectional foci. These were the initial three, and the first of those listed is that of building congregational vitality. I'm going to take some editorial privilege here and say that congregational vitality isn't what we thought it was. I was reading a brilliant book by Dr. William Yu. Please get it if you don't have it already, from Columbia University. And
title?
What Kind of Christianity is the name of the book. Thank you. What Kind of Christianity? It's a longer title, much longer, but right now I just remember that bolder part. There's the title and the subtitle.
Right.
Yeah. William Yu, Y-O-O.
I just spent some time with Dr. Yu at the board meeting, the PMA board meeting, and he came in and spoke with us, and it was required reading for the board. And anytime anything is required reading for me, I'm like, this is going to be dry and boring, and I don't really want to do this.
Yeah.
Dr. Yu goes through the history of the Presbyterian Church and how, but he does it in such a way that is incredibly engaging. I highly, 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 highly recommend every Presbytery read this book. It will give you a new insight into Presbyterian history and how we played a very active role in oppression and marginalization and racism. And it was heartbreaking and eye-opening and a little convicting.
Yeah.
But it's good.
Give us the title again.
It's called, Tony actually has it here. Thank you again, Tony. It's called What Kind of Christianity? A History of Slavery and Anti-Black Racism in the Presbyterian Church by Dr. William Yu.
Okay, all right,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah, and I will say that the title is almost limiting because he does a amazing historical review, but mostly he talks about how the history of not just the Presbyterian church, but the church, writ large Christianity, was built on sort of the opposing sides of each one of these foci, right? Congregational vitality, for many of us, two things. One, we tend to think of vitality in numbers, somehow being related. Tony has a brilliant presentation he'll do later. But congregational vitality should be seen through this lens. This one's heavy, so I usually give a little bit of a pause. Excuse me on camera. Generally speaking, as leaders in congregations, we can never say we're Bible. Only the people we serve can say Bible, and it's through this lens. If your church were to leave, to close, would they miss you? And that's how vitality is identified, right? Like, I'm vital to my wife because she says so. I can never say so. She rarely says so either. But she can say I'm a great husband. I can only say I'm a great guy. And I can't even say that, but again, I digress. I think we're getting the point. Structural racism, you know, being inviting and speaking to people is one thing, but dealing with the structures that have been developed over time, that for many of us, we don't even see them anymore. We're blind to them because they're so much a part of our society. And in many cases, in many congregations we go to, especially, granted, lest there's no secret, our denomination is
Predominantly white.
Predominantly white, right? And so I go to a lot of congregations, a lot of Presbyterians, and it's, well, we really don't have that issue because we don't have any people of color even in our congregation or in our community. I'm like, well, how do we accomplish that?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, because we aren't the original inhabitants of this land, so how are there no people of color around? No Native Americans? None? How do we do that? Right? And so that's where some of that conversation has to take place. And finally, eradicating systemic poverty. Eradicating systemic poverty. And we love Christianity. And we love saying, the poor will be with us always. Quote that scripture. But we forget to keep reading, where it says a part of who we are is to be supportive to the people who have less. The whole idea of the redistribution of wealth is the life of Jesus. That is Jesus' life. And so these three foci help us to identify what it means for us to be Presbyterian. I'm going to move through the rest of these slides pretty quickly here, but building congregational vitality, of course, again, our ministry area being the Office of Vital Congregations has a two-year initiative that helps congregations and presbyteries to realize and reimagine themselves according to looking at themselves as part of being the incarnate Christ in the community and in the world. And also the Office of 1001 New Worshiping Communities helps with congregations identifying what it means to be new and vital in the communities where we serve. Dismantling structural racism. We ideally and typically move in that ministry area through the Office of Racial Equity and Women's Intercultural Ministries. And again, our departments, our areas overlap in many ways, but these are the folks that are primarily responsible there. And finally, in eradicating systemic poverty, two offices, the Office of Self-Development of People and the Office of Presbyterian Disaster Relief. Certainly following Hurricane Ian, we've seen a lot of work coming out of PD. So we get to this point that I started with, which is, how do I become a Matthew 25 presbytery? Or how do I become a Matthew 25 congregation? Well, I'm glad you asked. Because it's really, really easy. We can provide this link to you, and I can certainly click on it to show you, but there's nothing to begin doing except to go to this link where you'll see 3 boxes. And you can say, I want to start with building congregational vitality, or start with dismantling structural racism, or eradicating systemic poverty, or doing all 3, or any 2 of them. And that's it. And then reporting on your stories of how there's nothing that's too small. Every book study, every sermon, every Bible study, every conversation is moving us a little further down the road. And again, certainly these ministry areas are here to support you as you move down those roads. And so again, later today, Tony and I will share more with you about congregational vitality as we move into this particular partnership about Project Grow. But that's it for me. And yes.
Yeah, so I'm going to add a little bit to what Carlton has said about Matthew 25 and the Matthew 25. I like to call it, and Diane and I, the president and executive director, we actually began to call this the Matthew 25 movement, because we now have over 1,000, I think the last numbers that came in this week is 1,053 churches, 40-something, I think it's 43, 47 presbyteries, and more than 50 groups. We're almost at 50% of our presbyteries being a part of this Matthew 25 movement. And so now you know from Carlton's presentation, right, what Matthew 25 is about. And I now get to say why you should be a part of it. Because it's great to say, oh, well, that's a great initiative. That's interesting, and I like those 3 foci, and that makes sense. But why? What is the importance of being a part of the Matthew 25 movement? And really, just to be quite just blunt about it, because Jesus calls us to this. Right? In Matthew 25, Jesus says, I was hungry. Did you give me something to drink? I was thirsty. Did you give me something to drink? I was hungry. Did you give me anything to eat? And we are called to be Matthew 25 people, and as churches, as presbyteries, as congregations, if we are living out the gospel, if we are being followers of Christ, innately in that is we are being Matthew 25. And so, again, as Carlton said, this came out of the 222nd General Assembly, so this is something that, as a church, as a denomination, we see as incredibly important into the DNA of who we are and how we represent Christ to the world. So if you sign up, and again, I've had conversations with folks about being signing up to be a Matthew 25 church, and here's what I hear. I don't want to go through all the paperwork. I don't want to go through the yearly assessments. I don't want to have to do a report every year that says, and I really don't care about that certificate that comes with it. Guess what? We don't either.
That's right.
We don't either. So what we have done is made it incredibly easy. All you have to do is go to that website, pcusa.org/Matthew25. And I think you have to have your name and email address and the name of your presbytery, and you join. Here's the importance of joining. When you join the movement, you now become a Matthew 25 church that gives you access to resources. It gives you access to a community of Matthew 25 folks. So you have now this network. We are a connectional church. So now you have a network of other churches, other presbyteries who are engaged in the same work and say, hey, we've got this garden at St. Andrews that we started several years ago before the church was built, and we are feeding people in our community We'd like to kind of take that up to the next level. Anybody else have a community garden in their presbytery or their church that they're working with? How are you all going about doing that, right? Then you might hear from Black Mountain Church who says, oh yeah, we've got a community garden too. And what we've done is we've opened it up to our entire community, and anybody can have space in our garden, and the only thing that they pay is they commit that 10% of the bounty that comes from their garden, 10% of that goes to Bounty and Soul, one of our partners in our community that feeds folks. And part of what Bounty and Soul does is they have a free farmers market every single Saturday where the folks come and they enjoy getting the fruits of the labor that happened over at your community garden. And then part of what Bounty and Soul does, one of our partners in the community, they teach folks how to cook with fresh vegetables and fresh fruits. And then we also take, when Bounty and Soul doesn't need our stuff, we give it to our other community partner here. So you're part of this network of people who have been doing this. And you become part of being able to see how other presbyteries and other churches are making this work come to life. You also get into a Matthew 25 Facebook group where you get the latest information on upcoming resources, Bible studies, worship, liturgy, all that kind of great stuff. There's also a Matthew 25 podcast that's dropping November 20th that is looking at the lectionary through the Matthew 25 lens. So each week, for pastors, for clergy, for congregants, the podcast will drop a week before that lectionary passage. So if Kyle, if you're preaching on November 27th, that drops the weekend before, and you can say, how should I reflect on this? What if I were going to approach this scripture through the Matthew 25 lens? What are some things that might bubble up for me? There's reflection questions included in that podcast. There's music included in that podcast that you can use. We also have Being Matthew 25. This is a monthly live stream that's on Facebook that Diane and I do together, where we talk to congregations and presbyteries who are doing this work, and we tell their stories. So you've got that as a resource. There's all kinds of different things. The resource that we're most excited about right now, and it is what we call in a soft launch. It's not gone out to the public at large yet, but we have a brand new Matthew 25 phone app. And on this phone app, you can, every single Matthew 25 church is listed. And whenever you go to find a church, you can put in, let's say, the Fellowship Place, which is in Charlotte. Well, let's go to, here we go. Siege Avenue Presbyterian Church in North Carolina. And all of a sudden, it has the phone number, a link to their website, and you click on that, and it brings up a map of how to get there. So by being a Matthew 25 church or a Matthew 25 presbytery, all of a sudden, anybody with this app can link to your church, can link to your website, can get real-time access to you. Also on the app, we have resources. We have learning resources, we have worship resources, we have stories, and we have videos of Matthew 25. And you can download these to your phone, or they can be emailed to you. So there's also an ACT resources of ways you can bring Matthew 25 alive in your presbytery or your church. So, I mean,
I want y'all to get excited about that. You're the first people to hear about this.
This really is,
Yeah.
so the only other people that the Matthew 25 app has been rolled out to is our board.
That's it.
So you all, literally, as Carlton said, are the first presbytery
Yeah.
to hear about Matthew 25 app and really the power that it brings to the presbyteries, the resource
So
that
how
it
do
can
we get
be
it?
for you. Huh?
How do we get it? I know it's in a soft launch, but how do we get it?
You can go
it's
right
on-
now
it's
to
on
the
here.
Apple Store
Okay, it's there.
I
All right.
just-
and
got it.
download it. Yeah, it's there, Kyle.
Yeah.
It's there.
And you're an early adopter.
I just
That's it.
Yeah.
downloaded
Who
it.
did
Got
you
it,
use as, who
good.
did you use as an engine for that?
We actually worked with Willow Marketing in Indianapolis to build that for us. So
Okay.
it is a custom app.
Okay.
And we have the ability then to control it, to add it, to tweak to it,
Okay.
and that type of thing. So we wanted to be sure that it was a custom app so that we can continually assess the needs of our presbyteries and our churches to see what you need to have on hand, and also what Presbyterians and beyond need to have for being Matthew 20 or for Matthew 25 as a connection point. The other really exciting thing that you all are the first presbytery to learn about is that we are actually on November 10th, we are being interviewed, by we, I mean J. Herbert Nelson II, our stated clerk, Diane Gibbons Moffett is being interviewed, and you saw the story from Concrete, Washington. Danielle and Kevin are being interviewed for a nationwide media campaign. This is the first time in Presbyterian history this has ever happened. We are, yes, this is really exciting because we really
Presbyterian
believe in this Matthew 25 movement, and part of this movement is this campaign. And so we will be on PBS stations throughout the nation for an 8-minute segment called Viewpoint. Viewpoint is hosted by Dennis Quaid. Anybody remember Dennis Quaid? Yeah, so they are doing a series of little educational documentaries in between shows like Antique Roadshow and whatever else is on PBS. I can't think of the top of my head. In between those segments, they'll do 8-minute documentaries oftentimes. And Viewpoint is one of those types of documentaries. And Viewpoint is really wanting to tell stories of faith-based organizations who are transforming their communities. And so whenever I found out about this, I was like, that's us! We're doing this! And so I contacted the producer, we had a conversation, we went through all of the minutia of that, and with over 1,000 applicants, the Presbyterian Mission Agency and the PCUSA was selected to be one of these faith-based organizations that's going to be highlighted. In addition to that, as part of this package, we are going to have 30-second infomercial spots on major media networks like CNN, MSNBC, Lifetime, Discovery, History, in prime time meaning 6 to 9 p.m. time slot, to tell the story of our church and how we are representing Christ to the world through Matthew 25, how we're eradicating systemic poverty, how we are dismantling structural racism, and how all of that flows from our vital congregations. So that should be rolling out after the first of the year. Folks, we're talking about a major shift in how we are presenting Christ to the world. We want to take Matthew 25 and this movement beyond our presbyteries, beyond our Presbyterian congregation, but literally to the world. We all know that the rising number of nuns and duns just continues to increase. It is higher than it's ever been before. And there is a host of people who really want and need to know Christ, who want to be engaged and committed to a community that is transforming their world, who need to know that through a deep and engaging relationship with other people, and a deep and engaging relationship with Christ, not only will they be transformed, but our communities and our world will be transformed. So, Matthew 25, please consider being part of that. You do not have to commit to working on every single one of these foci. I know that part of what you're really concentrated on right now is revitalizing and Project Grow. You can say whenever you sign up as a presbytery, we're vital congregations. That's what we're focused on. We have to start here. And that is absolutely 100% okay. So, I think that's what I've got to say about Matthew 25.
I just want to say, first of all, thank you again, Dee, and it's extremely exciting. My wife, who is a much better human being than I am,
Yep.
and actually, he knows. Actually, I'm going to say came close to becoming a part of one of the Duns, right? My wife grew up in the church as I did, and a long story, but we grew up so close to each other, we should have met decades ago. But at any rate, singing in music ministry and doing all the stuff. And so, when you're that close to church for 30, 40 years, you kind of get to the underbelly of church. And at some point, she just kind of got sick of it, and then she married a preacher, and it was like, and then she started seeing what our church, our denomination, was doing. And there may be something here. But beyond just coming to church or inviting people to church, just like, y'all need to get that story out to the world. I'm like, yeah, we got the website, we got and the thing is, you can't get people to get to the website unless you've got another avenue. And this is the thing that I love about my initial connection with Dee, like when we first met, among some of the other crazy stuff we talked about, which we'll tell later. But at any rate, one of the first conversations Dee, we had was about, what if we can get us on major TV? Because that's where, of course, my wife was in my ear saying, you got to get to television. I'm going like, yeah, but we got the website, we got Facebook page. You got to get, most of our audience isn't on social media. Most of our audience is watching TV from 6 to 9, right? And so that we're doing this, first of all, guess what? Nobody else is. Second of all, we have a message, and our message isn't come to church. Our message is join us in the world for what Christ is doing. Nobody's really interested in wearing crosses and Jesus t-shirts. I mean, that's nice stuff, nice to have. But what are we doing to transform the world? And that's what people are interested in. Yes, absolutely.
So you may be moving into this, but so if so, we can just answer it later. But like at St. Andrew, we're on your list of Matthew 25 congregations, and we've been for before COVID, so that's forever now. So, but we are. But I don't know how often we've been submitting our stories, and I don't know how often we've been taking advantage of your resources. I guess, do you want everything we're doing right now? I see you have an option for 250 words, just kind of quick blurbs on things or other things. How often do you want to hear from us as part of this, what you're trying to do, as you're trying to get other churches involved? We're like down the road, we're going, how can we help you for something more?
I think I wrote down as Dee and Carlton were speaking, a mustard seed of a story. I mean, it doesn't have to be, that you had 1,000 people show up for your food, for your garden. Maybe you had one, and that one person you had a really good conversation with. I think, just a mustard seed of a story. It can be a small one, but God will use that.
Jeff, send me anything.
Yep.
Okay. We got a lot. So
Yeah. And the great thing, here's the sort of the amazing way that I think God works, right? Who would have thought when I did that workshop on Zoom, 2 years ago now, that Jeff and Rob would have seen it and then reached out to me to come here, and then fast forward a year later and transitions in my position, and now here we are again, right? To me, this is the way that God works. This is the way that the Spirit moves in which things are lining up. And so, you know, you have my contact information.
Yeah.
Send me whatever. And, you know, we could even, you know, feature St. Andrews on the Being Matthew 25, you know, one of our live streams. So let's have that conversation as well and talk about the work that the East Iowa Presbytery is doing as a whole. So, yeah,
We're almost
absolutely.
completely orienting around it. I mean, our
Exactly.
children's programs, 25 Live.
Right.
Every week, our confirmation is shifting over to a
Yeah,
Matthew
absolutely.
25 approach.
right.
We're
That's awesome.
we're looking at a redesign of our website,
Mhm.
that as we're trying to divide up our, what we do, we're gonna just do a Matthew 25 page perhaps, and use all of the different principles as
Yeah.
a way to define it, so that would be, but
Yeah.
but a lot of this is a little bit of brainstorming and
Mhm.
not always, I go to your resource links and it's either not what we're looking for or so much what we're looking for, it's hard to dive in.
Mhm,
in this
right.
way, yeah.
Sure.
So let's have that
great.
conversation offline and maybe get the team together and figure out how we can do that. But talking about the Presbytery as a whole, just to piggyback real quick on something that Carlton said about his wife, I want to tell you a story about my friend Kate. Kate grew up in San Diego, and Kate is a national athlete who went to the University of Tennessee on a full ride scholarship for rowing. Kate also went to the Olympic trials to make the Olympics, and decided that that just wasn't for her. At any rate, growing up in Southern California, Kate came from a family where her mom was a hardcore, and still is, a hardcore fundamentalist evangelical, and her father wanted nothing to do with it. And at the age of 8, after going to church with her mom, she decided, yeah, this isn't for me. I'm not doing this. And she had a conversation with her dad, and her dad said, well, I understand. You don't have to go. You can stay home with me on Sundays. And so Kate was raised, on the one hand, with one parent who was incredibly, you know, fervent about her very conservative faith, and then a father who was absolutely not engaged with faith or religion at all. Fast forward to Kate going to the University of Tennessee, graduating, and then ending up at the University of Louisville in a PhD program, for which my wife is also a candidate in. Kate and I have become friends, and Kate has engaged in several conversations with me about my faith and the denomination for which I work. And her mind has been blown a little bit by, what do you mean that you all are attacking systemic racism? What do you mean that you're wanting to eradicate poverty? What does that look like? And so I tell her stories of the work that our various churches are doing. Kate goes up to Minneapolis for a bike and beer trail tour with her best friend. And I get a call from Kate on my cell phone, and she says, Dee, I got my friend who was on the rowing team with me back at UT, and she still lives in Knoxville, and she's starting to have some questions about faith. And I began telling her about you and that denomination, that place that you work for. What is it again? And I said, it's the Presbyterian Church USA. Well, do they have churches in Knoxville? I said, oh yeah, we absolutely do. We have churches around the nation. Well, so she's interested in finding out if there's a church there in Knoxville that maybe she might visit. Can you give me some names of churches? And it was in that moment that I thought, we need an app. There are people out there, through the act of storytelling, through the way that God is just maneuvering things in our lives and the Spirit is moving, that are actively searching for a faith family to call home. So I said, well, yes, let me do some research and I will get back to you with a list of churches for your friend. And so now her friend is attending First Presbyterian Church in Knoxville, who's doing amazing things in their community. And her entire world has been transformed. Her life has been transformed, and she's working to transform her community. So I say all this to say something is happening here. Something is moving, something is shifting, and in the midst of all of this unknown, it can be anxiety producing, right? And we can say, ooh, this looks overwhelming, we're paralyzed, we don't know what's happening. But if we can breathe a little bit, if we can let go of our sense of control and power and really lean in to where God is and where God is moving, I really believe that lives can be changed.
I really enjoy hearing that, and I enjoy hearing about the app, and I enjoy hearing about being on TV, because to me it took the global pandemic to shift the church, the entire, like the universal church, into the 21st century. For the most part, the church, whether PCUSA or Methodist or whatever, was stuck in like the 19th century. We did things one way, and it kind of got stuck. And then in a matter of months, we had to shift to the 21st century. And I've worked with Carlton since May, and this is like the third time I've met him in person, third or fourth time I've met him in person. Our whole worlds have changed, and hearing that the church, our denomination, is not going backwards, but continuing to push forwards into the new technology, the newer edges, and not retreating back to what is comfortable. That makes me feel good.
Here's a story that I feel like this is a group that will enjoy as we kind of prepare for our next part of the day. There is any nature lovers here? I'm from the concrete jungle. I'm from the middle of Atlanta. I grew up there. When I was flying in here from Minneapolis, the lady sitting next to me, she goes, this doesn't look like flying into Hartsfield, does it? I'm going. So, admittedly, I'm, not as much a nature person as probably the next person. And this story caught my attention. Bird watchers literally study, one of the things they study is how far some birds can fly without flapping their wings. I didn't know this. You're nodding. You bird watcher, maybe? Okay.
No, but
Okay. Well, this story involves some bird watchers that were watching condors. And as
Watching what?
Condors.
Oh, okay.
Condors. Big condors. I saw one for the first time when I was in the Upper Peninsula about 4 years ago. Scared the life out of me. It's like I was sitting at a red light and the car got dark and then lighted me, and I was like, what was that? This thing has a wingspan like 20 feet. It didn't breathe. So they're studying condors, standing on the side of a mountain, condors. And, one has the bright idea, want to know how much they flap, and probably similar to the story, say, well, there's probably an app for that. So they actually get a device and they attach it to the wing of a condor. Actually, they found two. And of these two condors, one flew over 120 miles without flapping its wings. Another flew almost 140 miles without flapping its wings. What does that say to us as the church?
They're sailplanes.
The wind of God is moving. Sometimes we're working so hard. How do we get people to come to church? How do we get people to do this? And God is saying, just get on the wind and go where I'm taking you. Where, what Tony talked about a moment ago, what Dee talked about is, things are changing, it's weird, I'm a church guy, I know I look like I'm under 20, but, thank you. But I've been in church service almost every day of my life for almost 60 years now. And with that, this certain amount of change that's happened in the last 3 or 4 years is weird for me. And getting on the wind, you know, for those Greek and Hebrew scholars in the room, the ruach, the wind, the Spirit of God, getting, and just kind of going where God is leading us. And not working as hard what I want to do or what I remember, but seeing where is God going and following that has been an extremely blessed and relaxing thing for me. Scary a lot of days. Most nights, I mean, including last night. Going, how are we gonna? Yeah. How are we gonna? And God just comes up with, yeah, you're gonna. You're gonna.
We're gonna.
We're gonna, right? God says kind of, I'm gonna, and you get up out of bed and follow me, right?
Yeah.
And so yes, far too often, we work hard because we want to make sure that we have enough investment, demonstrated investment, right? We're Americans, right? We want demonstrated investment. We want a display of how invested we are. Numbers of people at church, numbers of, is this normal? I'm here. And God says that, check the biblical witness. Every time there's more, I do more with less. Check the narrative. Every time someone tries to win with more, I do more with less. What I work with is faith. And so these things that, again, I'm like, you don't have, probably your wife and maybe that's it, but you don't have too many bigger fans than me. Maybe Diane.
I don't know about
maybe but the stuff that Dee's area is doing, we attach to like immediately. Because they're putting, the old days of Tony and I jumping on a plane and going from here to here to here to here, good, but not as great as what it takes for, because the one person you talk to someone, not to another, growing in the work that church will do. That's how, because, and I'll say this and I'm done. The congregation where I serve in Atlanta, we grew more, we had a decline for some particular reasons, between 2015 and 2018. We lost almost half of our membership, right? Specifically, our regular Sunday attendance. Between 2020 and today, our membership has tripled, and we have fewer people in service on Sunday.
Fewer people to what?
We have fewer people in service Sunday morning, but our membership has tripled. Giving has tripled because we have a huge online audience. And some of those folks live within blocks of the church. They're just not interested in coming Sunday morning. They come and they work in our community garden.